Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program, Assemblyman Mike Norris. Mike Norris represents the 144th Assembly District in New York State. That's an Assembly District that includes parts of Erie, Niagara, and Orleans counties. We want to thank you folks all across Western New York for tuning in for our program today. Assemblyman Norris, nice to see you again, too.
It's great to see you too, Mike.
We are keeping you a very busy guy here at the state capitol right now. We are knee-deep in budget talks and the negotiations. The legislative budget hearings have just concluded. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about where the budget talks are going right now at the state capitol. But there's a number of other issues that have been coming front and center over the past couple of weeks, and let's start with those as we get this program underway. A particular bit of legislation passed the legislature, the Assembly, and the Senate a few years ago, but has been a pretty controversial one, is called the SAFE Act. There are those who like the SAFE Act who say, you know, there are enough guns in this state, and the guns that are there really should be accounted for. And then there are those who don't like the SAFE Act, and that's a lot of the sportsmen in this state who say, you know, you're just really clamping down on those people who know how to use their guns respectfully and rightly, and this is a bit of an overreach on the part of their government. So that bill came back, and you and some of your colleagues stood together and said, you know what, maybe we can find a good middle ground here, and maybe we can keep the SAFE Act for New York City and downstate, but change it some and make it a little bit less restrictive for the upstate and Long Island communities. Let's talk a little bit about that today.
I'm happy to. And I tell you, when I'm traveling throughout my district in Niagara, Erie, and Orleans, all the way from Youngstown right through the lake towns, down through Lockport, Royalton, Heartland, Shelby, and the town of Orleans, and Newstead and Akron, and Alden, I see the signs out there. Repeal the Safe Act. It's very loud and clear to me as a representative from the 144th Assembly District that message is what my constituents want. And when I travel throughout the district where I'm talking to the sportsman group, such as at the NRA banquets, at Scope, these are law-abiding citizens who would like the protection, the full protection of the Second Amendment and their rights under the Second Amendment. And of all the issues outside of job development and economic development issues, this is the one issue that I hear about most from the constituents. And I'll say about the bill, with Senator Rob Ort, who is a senator from our district, and along with Assemblyman Mark Butler, we have proposed legislation that would repeal the SAFE Act upstate and only allow the SAFE Act in New York City. And the reason for this is there is precedent in the city of New York that New York City is treated differently. For example, ride-sharing services, Uber and Lyft, they're allowed to have it in New York City. Currently, we are not allowed to have it upstate New York. Now, as you know, Mike, from previous shows, I'm a strong advocate of Uber and Lyft, ride-sharing for upstate New York. Here we have the NCAA tournament coming to Buffalo, no ride-sharing services. Again, so if anyone wants to go to my website and to sign on to my ride-sharing petition, I encourage you to do that. That's another example where we're treated differently than New York City. The other thing is minimum wage, for example. They have a higher wage scale than we do upstate. So why can't we have a different standard for the SAFE Act? Allow them to have it in New York City. I have no problem with that. If they want it, they can have it. And let the people upstate have our voice and the protection of the full protection of the Second Amendment. There are some specific points on the legislation that I would like to make sure we point out. One is right now under the current SAFE Act, it requires a 5-year recertification of your pistol permit. That provision will be wiped out under our proposed legislation. The other thing would be the statewide database. There would be a required statewide database operated by the New York State Police. Under our legislation, that would also be taken away under the proposed legislation. These are just good avenues and a retooling of the system that's been set forth under Governor Cuomo in the 2013 legislation. That would be good, I believe, for upstate and for the people of Western New York and the protection of our Second Amendment rights. The other one interesting thing about the SAFE Act is there's problems in transferring a firearm, particularly the historic firearms, the rifles from a long time ago, down generation to generation to generation through the estates. This would our legislation, Senator Ort's legislation, my legislation with Assemblyman Butler, would make it much easier for the passing of those historic rifles and firearms for generations to come.
I think what you're saying makes an awful lot of sense. Even though you're relatively new to the legislature, I'm going to guess that you've already got a pretty good sense, having listened to some of the debates that have taken place on the Assembly floor, that there can be a real dichotomy between New York City and the rest of the state, the upstate region, let's say. Some real differences of opinions, mindsets, philosophies, theologies, of legislative, how things should happen. And this seems like this would almost be a perfect fit, in other words, that it would satisfy those New York City interests as well as the upstate interests and all those people who have those signs out on their lawns that you're talking about.
That's exactly right. And there's precedent, like I said before, where they have certain rules, whether it be Uber and Lyft, minimum wage, differences in New York City. And this would just be another example where we would be treated differently as our interests are different in upstate New York. Though we are one state and we share many things together, this is one area where we have differences between New York City and upstate New York.
Now, as we continue a theme here and talk about changing, amending past legislation, you had the opportunity to do that on a different piece of legislation this past week, and that's the STAR rebate tax program, property tax rebate program, the STAR program, school tax relief. There was a change made during the budget process in Albany a year or two ago that changed it from a credit to a rebate check, or from a rebate check to a credit. And one of the things I heard over and over from those members who stood up and debated this change of the change to the STAR program is that we had something perfectly good and we screwed it up, and let's make it good again to what it was a few years ago.
As I was saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
And last year in the budget, what happened is that they made a change where before you would get a straight exemption right off your school property tax bill, clear, okay, it comes right off. But they changed it last year in a gimmick of the governor with his expenses versus loss of revenue, trying to keep under his imaginary 2% tax cap on the state to an actual rebate check back. Well, that has caused mass confusion. I'll give you an example, Mike. This last Sunday, on my way back to Albany, I stopped at my local coffee shop to have a cup of coffee with somebody, and one of my constituents grabbed me and says, "Mike, this is a disaster. I still have not gotten my school property tax relief check." And what I'm going to do is help that constituent and any others. Not just him, though. Many individuals have contacted my office of all the issues where they've phoned me or they've contacted my office. This is a number one issue. What we're done last week is the legislature recognized that there was an error last year in the budget. And we are going to reverse it back to how it was, where you would get a straight exemption right off of your school property tax, as it has been historically for the last 20 years or so. School property tax relief is a very important issue, and we need to make sure that we continue to do our part to keep property taxes down in New York State. It is a job killer, and I can assure the people of the 144th district that I'm going to continue to stand up and try to keep our property taxes down and make it as convenient as possible to get that relief that they rightly deserve.
It's so funny. It's so true. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Well, the state tried to fix it last year, and the governor, as you said, tried to make it different, make it better, and by doing that, broke it, so you needed to come back and fix it. I mean, it's like crazy, right?
It's crazy, but I have to commend it. There was a bipartisan, unanimous vote in the Assembly last week. Assemblywoman Galiff, she stood up from the other side of the aisle and says, listen, we need to go back and put it how it was, and I'm very excited about saying I was a strong supporter of that, a sponsor of that bill. And two more things on the STAR program that I want people to know about in this upcoming budget negotiation. The governor has proposed in his budget that number one, he wants to freeze STAR right where it is right now. So, for example, if you're getting a STAR exemption, hopefully there'll be an exemption again, that will stay fixed for many years to come. There will not be an increase over the next period of time. That is in the budget. The second thing is, for senior citizens, he wants to have a statewide income verification system for senior citizens for the enhanced STAR. Both of these proposals, I think, are very burdensome on the taxpayers, and I would like everyone to know back home that I am fighting very hard in this budget process to stop both of those proposals proposed by the governor.
All right, well, let's stay with the budget story as it's playing out right now at the state capitol. There are differing ideas on how to make New York State a more college affordable kind of a state. The governor made a big splash as he announced his budget proposal at the beginning of this year by talking about free tuition for everybody. There have been, since then, some counter proposals and some discussions as to really what the state could do here. One of the things I've heard over and over again is there is no such thing as free. I hear that a lot. So let's talk a little bit about college affordability and in particular tuition costs and what you think New York State could be doing to make college a more affordable thing for the kids that are heading out into that venue right now.
Yeah, Mike, speaking of I've been at volunteer fire company dinners. I was up at Fort Niagara for a volunteer recognition service, and I encourage everyone to get out to Fort Niagara, which is in Youngstown, New York. Over 266,000 people toured the fort last year, an increase of 20%. So that's in the 144th district, which I'm so proud of. But wherever I go, I've heard about this issue. And people are going to say, how can we afford to provide free education to everyone? Somebody has to pay for it. But at the same time, these middle-class families have told me, we need a little more relief. Can you please help? And we do have a plan that our Republican leader Brian Kolb has put forth, I have signed on to, which would actually increase TAP. We already have a system in place, a state tuition assistance program. And what that would do is actually expand TAP, increase the family income limit of $80,000 up to $125,000, so more families, middle-class families in New York State would be eligible for the current system of TAP. And the other good thing about this is it would not only apply to the public SUNY systems, which the governor has proposed in his plan for free tuition at the SUNY system. This would also extend to the private colleges too, because they're already in the TAP system. So places like Niagara University, Canisius College, Damon, and others in Western New York would still be able to partake in the TAP program. It would be a guarantee under my plan and Lieber Kolb's plan, a guaranteed $500 increase right away to a TAP. It would increase from $1,300 a maximum TAP reward right up to a higher amount. That would increase it, the maximum TAP award. And so I think that is the most fair way of doing this, to help our middle class families, to increase TAP and the burdens on them. And the other thing, once you get done with college, is that part of our plan is to have a deduction on your taxes for recent college graduates. So if you're a single filer, it'd be $4,000 deduction, or $8,000 if you've got a family. This would help keep college graduates working in Western New York and in New York State. And I think we have to do that. As jobs keep going further south, this would be a good way of keeping our brain trust right here fighting for us.
Well, I'll tell you, the budget is due to be in place by the end of the month of March. So we don't have much time left before this happens. It's going to be an interesting thing to watch and see how this budget negotiation all comes together this year, different ideas that come out, and how it plays out, especially in terms of college affordability and college tuition costs. Now, you folks watching want to know how to reach out to your representative. It's an important thing for you to know how to do. You've already heard tales here on the course of this program today about issues involving star rebate checks. If you haven't gotten yours, you should reach out to your representative. Or petitions for ride sharing and upstate. Whatever this may be that you've heard talked about, there's the way for you to contact Assemblyman Michael Norris. You can call the office at 839-4690. You can send an email, probably the easiest way to go about it, norrism@nyassembly.gov. Mike Norris, thanks for stopping by and talking to us, and we'll be in touch with you soon about how this budget process goes.
Thank you very much for having me, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you, too. Thank you, folks, and we'll hope to see you soon for our next Assembly Calendar.